Okay, so thinking about a career working with animals, maybe something in research.
Could be really rewarding.
We've got some info here from RoleCatcher. It's a career resource, and we're going to take a deep dive into what it means to be a zoology technician.
Yeah, it's a fascinating job, really. A blend of hands-on work, actually working with animals, but also that meticulous side of scientific research.
Right, so it's not just about, like, loving animals,
Right.
right?
No, not at all.
The guide really emphasizes that specializing is key for zoology technicians.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what makes you think about, with all the advances in things like genomics, conservation tech, what kind of niche areas are becoming really hot right now? Like, are we
Yeah.
talking wildlife genetics, bioacoustics? What do you think?
Such a good question.
It's a big field.
I'm really curious to get your take on this as we go through this.
Yeah, definitely.
So, the guide mentions that zoology technicians provide technical assistance with research and analyze data from experiments, but what does that actually look like day to day?
Well, you could be, imagine tracking animal movements,
Yeah.
but using GIS, or maybe studying stress hormones in blood samples. It really does run the gamut.
Okay, wow.
It's not all lab work, though.
That's right. They mentioned field work,
Yeah.
which sounds amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
What's the balance like between, being in a lab versus being out in the field, maybe on an expedition somewhere?
It really depends on, you could be working in a lab, sure, but also zoos, conservation organizations.
Yeah.
You could even find yourself, traveling for field work, collecting data on endangered species,
Wow.
maybe in the rainforest.
Field work in the rainforest, that does sound pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I have to admit, though, reading through the guide, they mentioned exposure to hazardous materials, long hours potentially, irregular hours even,
Right. Yeah. Could be tough.
and emotional stress.
Yeah.
It's not always, cuddly animals and
Yeah.
exciting discoveries, is it?
It's true. Working with animals, encountering them in the wild, it takes resilience, that's for sure. But it's about contributing to something bigger,
Absolutely. Yeah,
wouldn't you say?
for sure. And speaking of contributing, they mention animal enrichment programs quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
What are some, I don't know, recent breakthroughs or innovative strategies in animal enrichment that you find particularly interesting?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a lot of cool stuff happening with puzzle feeders,
Okay.
you know, encouraging natural foraging behavior, even in captive animals.
Right.
That's one thing.
Makes sense.
And then there's a big push for creating more stimulating environments in general,
Yeah.
encouraging those species-specific behaviors, even in a research setting, which is important.
So it's not just about, like, studying the animals, but also actively working to improve their lives,
Exactly.
even in
But-
captivity, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and it speaks to how the role is evolving, I think.
Right.
Incorporating more advocacy for animal welfare into that research setting,
Yeah, that's really cool.
which is really important.
I agree, yeah. Now, the guide mentions labs, zoos, conservation organizations as places where zoological technicians can work, but are there other possibilities as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
They also mention academic institutions, working on a campus,
Right.
and even government agencies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, lots of options.
That's a really diverse range of opportunities
Yeah.
within this field, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Now, let's go back to those specializations for a second.
Yeah.
We talked about how important they are, but they were a little vague on specifics.
Right.
What should an aspiring zoology technician consider when they're trying to choose the right niche for them?
Well, it's like, how do you find your passion within your passion?
Right. Right.
You gotta think. What really excites you about zoology?
Yeah.
Is it the genetics behind animal behavior, or maybe the intricacies of marine
So
ecosystem?
many options.
Exactly. Once you've kind of like identified that area, that's when you can really start seeking out, opportunities to build those specialized skills, get that experience.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Find that intersection between what you're good at and what you're, really passionate about.
Exactly.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
let's talk about the qualifications.
Yeah.
What does it actually take to be a zoology technician? What does the guide say about education?
Well, usually a bachelor's degree in a related field, so like zoology, biology,
Okay.
that's kind of the standard.
Okay.
But, they did mention that some positions might consider an associate degree, especially if you have a lot of hands-on experience.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So a solid foundation in the sciences is definitely key.
For sure.
But what about those hands-on skills? For someone who's listening, who's thinking, this is me, this sounds amazing,
Yeah.
what should they be focusing on developing?
Well, the guide highlights a few things. So lab techniques,
Oh.
being comfortable in a lab setting,
Right.
data analysis, very important these days.
Right.
Attention to detail, can't stress that enough.
Right.
And then, strong communication skills as well.
Interesting.
And it's not just about the science.
Right.
You got to be able to talk about it too.
It's like that bridge, right?
Yeah.
Between the research and actually communicating it effectively.
Exactly.
So we're not just talking about someone who's like, comfortable with a microscope,
Right.
but someone who can then take that and talk about their findings, maybe even present at a conference or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Present at a conference, write a paper, all that stuff.
It sounds like a really fascinating blend of like the scientific rigor,
Yeah.
but then those all-important soft skills, those people skills, communication.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so unique. You're constantly, you're learning, you're collaborating, you're finding new ways to kind of like apply your knowledge,
Oh.
which is really cool.
Speaking of applying knowledge, I thought it was interesting how the guide outlined like different stages of a career.
Oh, yeah. How's that look?
As a zoology technician, yeah, because it's not just, you're a zoology technician and that's it, right?
Oh, it's a whole path.
There's like a progression.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
What's that look like?
Well, it sounds like you start by, assisting senior technicians,
Yeah.
kind of learning the ropes.
Right.
And then from there, you gradually take on more responsibility as you gain experience.
Okay.
But what I thought was really interesting was how much they emphasized mentorship
Oh, interesting.
and the idea that, you could eventually be the one leading research projects.
Wow. Okay.
So it's like this really cool kind of like passing of the torch in a way.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's almost like an apprenticeship at the beginning, right? Where you're really like soaking up all that knowledge
Absolutely, yeah.
from the more, seasoned technicians.
Good way.
So you go through that initial stage, and then what? What's the next step? How do you progress from there?
So then it seems like you move into a more independent role.
Okay.
Maybe start conducting your own research projects.
Wow.
Under supervision, of course, at that stage.
Right.
But still, you're starting to take ownership a little bit more.
Yeah, you're not just following instructions.
Exactly.
You're
Let's
starting
say.
to actually contribute your own ideas.
Contribute your own ideas. Yeah, exactly.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what? What comes after that?
That's when it gets really, I think, exciting, at least from
Right.
reading the guide.
Right.
They talk about, senior zoology technicians. They might be leading research teams,
Wow.
mentoring those junior technicians, and even like potentially publishing their findings
Oh, wow.
in scientific journals.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, so you're really becoming an expert in your field at that point.
Wow, that's a whole other level.
It is. It's really cool.
That's amazing to see that kind of progression.
Yeah.
Outlined, from literally assisting with experiments
Right.
to potentially like becoming a leading voice in your field.
It's a great career path if you're passionate about it, that's for sure.
That is really, really cool. Okay, so before we get like, too caught up in like the excitement of publishing papers and all that,
Sure, yeah.
let's talk about the financial side of things.
Yeah.
What's the earning potential? Like, let's be honest, what does the guide say?
So they say the average salary, and again, this could vary a lot,
Sure.
but the average is somewhere between $35,000 to $50,000 a year,
Oh,
which,
that's a good range.
it's a starting point, and of course that can change based on location, experience, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it gives you a realistic sense, right,
Right, exactly.
of what to expect.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the salary either.
No, not at all.
The guide mentions certifications.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
That can, potentially boost your job prospects and even your salary expectations.
Absolutely. Things like, the certified lab animal technician, the LET,
Okay.
or the certified wildlife biologist, the CWB.
Wow. Okay.
Those aren't always required, but they can definitely give you an edge because it shows that commitment to professional development.
Like,
You're taking those extra steps.
it's like adding another tool to your belt,
Exactly.
or like leveling up in a video game.
There you go.
It makes you a more like desirable candidate, which
Yeah.
is never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing. Exactly.
No, I'm curious. We talked about animal enrichment programs, right?
Yeah.
But we didn't really get into what that looks like for a zoology technician, like practically.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So animal enrichment programs, they're all about, improving the well-being of animals,
Mm-hmm.
especially in those captive settings, right?
Okay.
So think zoos, labs, sanctuaries, any place where animals are living in a managed environment.
Right.
And it's all about creating environments that are stimulating for them,
Right.
that encourage natural behaviors.
Yeah.
And zoology technicians, they actually play a really big role in designing these programs and implementing them.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about caring for like their physical needs, but also their like mental well-being.
Absolutely. And that requires, really understanding animal behavior
Right.
and having that commitment
Hmm.
to providing the best possible care, even if it's not, the wild. It's
Right,
about
right.
creating that more humane, enriching environment for them.
It sounds really rewarding, actually.
It is. It's a really, I think it's one of those things where you're really making a difference
Right.
in the lives of these animals.
It sounds like it takes a special kind of person
It does, yeah.
to be a zoology technician, right?
Yeah.
Someone with both the scientific knowledge,
Right.
but then also the compassion to advocate
Absolutely.
for these animals.
You got to have both.
Yeah, really
You
interesting.
can't just be, cold and calculating.
Right.
You have to actually, care about the animals.
Right, have that empathy.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we're getting close to the end of our kind of deep dive here.
Yeah, this has been really interesting.
I've learned so much about zoology technicians.
It's a cool field.
It's a field with its challenges, for sure,
For sure, like we talked about.
but also the rewards seem incredible.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up entirely, there was one thing in the guide that I wanted to circle back to,
Okay.
and that was the interview process.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Because they had a whole section on common interview questions
They do.
that I thought would be really valuable for our listeners to hear.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Let's dive in.
Are you ready to kind of unpack some of those?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So we've talked about what it takes to be a zoology technician,
Yeah.
all the cool stuff they do.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing career path.
But now it's time for the interview.
Oh, yeah, the interview. That's a big one.
The guide had some really interesting tips on what to expect.
Okay, like what?
And I gotta say, some of these questions, they really make you think.
Do tell. Do tell.
One that stood out to me was, describe your experience working with animals.
Okay, yeah. Seems pretty straightforward.
Right. But I bet there's a right way and a wrong way to answer that.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just say, oh, I love animals.
Yeah.
Everyone loves animals.
Exactly. You gotta go deeper.
You got to show them you get it, Like, you understand animal behavior, how to handle them safely, all that.
It's all about those specifics.
Yeah. Talk about actual situations, maybe from volunteering at a shelter or that research project you did. Those moments that really tested you.
Right, where you had to think on your feet.
Exactly. Show them you can handle the unexpected.
Because let's be real, working with animals, there's always something unexpected.
Always. That's part of the fun.
Okay, another question they mentioned was, how do you handle conflicts or disagreements with coworkers or supervisors?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right, like how do you even answer that?
Well, it's tricky, but it shows they're looking for those people skills.
Because you're not just working with animals, you're working with a whole team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you got to show them you can communicate effectively, find solutions, keep things positive, even when things get a little tense.
It's that whole idea of being a team player, even in a scientific setting.
Absolutely, because science isn't always solo, right? It's collaborative.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And speaking of science, they also mentioned that they like to ask about your knowledge of zoology
Okay, makes sense.
and current research, just to make sure you're up to date.
They want to see that you're passionate, that you're following the latest discoveries, reading those journals, all that good stuff.
So for anyone listening who's prepping for a zoology technician interview, brush up on your zoology knowledge.
Yes. Know your stuff.
Practice those storytelling skills. Bring those experiences to life.
Show your passion.
And be ready to talk about those, those trickier interpersonal situations.
All part of the job.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up, one final thought.
Okay, shoot.
The guy didn't really touch on this, but with all the technology being used in zoology now, like AI, big data, all that, how do you see the role evolving in the future?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Right.
I think it's going to be fascinating, honestly.
Right.
Because as technology changes, zoology technicians will need to change too.
Adapt or be left behind kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So we're probably going to see a greater need for technicians who are really good with data analysis, computer modeling, even coding.
Wow. So it's almost like the line between fieldwork and high-tech research is blurring.
Totally. And I think that's really exciting. It's not just about using the technology, it's about finding new ways to apply it.
So many possibilities.
Exactly. Who knows what incredible discoveries are out there waiting to be made.
And that's a perfect note to end on, I think.
It really is.
That sense of wonder and excitement for the future of this field.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of a zoology technician.
This was fun.
I hope you learned some valuable stuff today, maybe even feel inspired to pursue your own passion for the natural world.
Follow your passion. That's what I always say.
And as always, thank you for joining us in the deep dive,
Always a pleasure.
where we explore fascinating topics and emerge with a deeper understanding of the world around us.